You know, we hear so much these days about dementia being on the rise. It feels like it's touching more and more lives every year. It's heavy stuff for sure. But what if I told you that we could actually change those projections? What if nearly half of all dementia cases could be prevented? And not with some like futuristic cure or anything, but by things we can control right now.
It really makes you think.
It
Yeah.
does. And that's actually what's so fascinating about this 2024 report from the Lancet Commission on Dementia. They did this massive undertaking, a global effort, really, to understand not just dementia itself, but how to prevent it.
And it is a massive report.
It is. So that's what we're going to be diving into today, unpacking the key findings and really thinking about what they mean for, well, for you. And get this, they actually added two brand new risk factors to the list this year, and they are vision loss and high cholesterol. I don't know about you, but those aren't things that I would immediately connected to brain health.
It is surprising, isn't it?
Yeah.
We usually associate those things with like our eyes or our heart health. But when you think about it, it really drives home how crucial a life course perspective is when it comes to dementia prevention.
Okay, life course perspective. What exactly does that mean?
So basically, it means that our risk for dementia isn't just determined by what we do, later in life, but it's actually influenced by a ton of different factors that accumulate as we go through life.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like, imagine a tapestry, right?
Okay.
Woven from all these different threads of our experiences and choices. And each stage of life, early childhood, midlife, older age, those all contribute different threads to the tapestry.
I like that. I'm starting to get the picture here.
Yeah. And some of those threads, they represent things like our education level, our social connections, even our exposure to things like air pollution.
Okay, so those threads, those risk factors, they sound kind of familiar, though. What exactly are we talking about here?
Yeah, you're right. A lot of them are things we've heard before, but the report does such a good job of clarifying those connections. For example, early in life, it's things like having access to education, and early hearing loss can actually have a lasting impact.
Interesting.
And then as we move into midlife, that's when you start to see factors like head injuries, smoking, high blood pressure, even untreated depression. Those come into play.
So it's almost like these risk factors can kind of build on each other as we go through life.
That's it, exactly. And, unfortunately, they often cluster together, like someone with a lower socioeconomic status might have limited access to healthcare.
Yeah.
Which can then mean untreated high blood pressure or diabetes.
Yeah.
And that further increases their risk.
Wow. That's a lot to take in. Okay, so with all of these risk factors potentially adding up over a lifetime, is there any good news here? Because remember at the beginning when I said that almost half of dementia cases are potentially preventable.
Right.
This report actually puts a number on that, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, and it's a really significant number.
Yeah.
By actually addressing these, what we call modifiable risk factors,
Yeah.
which are those things we can change, the report suggests that we could prevent or at least delay almost half of all dementia cases.
Okay, now we're talking. But before we get too excited here, you use that phrase, modifiable risk factors. What does that mean exactly? And, if we're talking about things that I can actually do something about, I want to know more about those two new risk factors, the vision loss and high cholesterol.
Yeah, you're right to focus on those. So modifiable basically means that we're not talking about things like genetics that, we can't control.
Right.
These are areas where lifestyle changes, different kinds of interventions, even just simple awareness can make a real difference.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, we should definitely explore that connection between vision loss, cholesterol, and our brain health. It's really fascinating stuff. So let's start with that vision loss piece, because I think a lot of people listening are like, vision loss? Really?
Yeah, it does seem a little strange at first.
Yeah, it does. But when you actually stop and think about it, our brains, they rely so much on the input from our senses, right? And so when we lose our sight, our brains actually have to work harder to process information from the other senses that are still functioning. It's like our cognitive resources get stretched thin. You know what I mean?
So it's not that vision loss is directly causing dementia, but it's kind of putting a strain on the brain, making it maybe a little more vulnerable over time.
Exactly. You phrased that perfectly. And there's actually a growing body of research that shows that this strain can have some really significant long-term consequences.
Okay.
Like, for example, there are studies that have shown that people with untreated vision loss, they tend to experience a faster rate of cognitive decline. And they're even more likely to develop dementia later on compared to folks who've either maintained good vision or sought treatment for any vision problems they might have.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about high cholesterol then? I always thought that was like a heart health issue.
Oh, it definitely is. It's a major risk factor for
Uh,
heart disease, no question. But what's becoming more and more clear is that, like, what's bad for our hearts is usually bad for our brains, too.
Makes sense.
High cholesterol, it can damage our blood vessels, and that includes the blood vessels in our brains.
Uh,
And that damage can actually restrict blood flow, which means less oxygen is getting to our precious brain cells.
so it's literally like starving the brain of the nutrients it needs to thrive.
Exactly. And then over time, that can lead to what we call vascular dementia, which is like a type of dementia that's specifically caused by damage to those blood vessels in the brain.
Wow, okay. This is all starting to paint a much clearer picture for me. But it does feel like with all these potential risk factors, we really need to be like extra vigilant about every single aspect of our health.
Yeah, I think, it's not about obsessing over every little thing, but I think what this report really highlights is the importance of like a holistic view of health.
Okay.
And that's where that life course perspective becomes really valuable because it encourages us to make healthy choices throughout our entire lives, knowing that those choices, they all have a cumulative impact on our brain health down the road.
And this report doesn't just point out the problems, does it? It actually offers some really empowering solutions. Like
Yeah.
the fact that even if you have some of these risk factors already, there are still things you can do to lower your risk or at least delay the onset of dementia.
100%.
Ah,
And that's what makes this report so hopeful, right? It's not meant to scare people. It's a call to action.
yeah.
It's this reminder that we have agency, that we can take control of our health destiny, so to speak. And it's never too early or too late to start making positive changes.
I love that. Okay, so say someone is listening to this and they're like, all right, I'm convinced. Where do I start? What would you say?
I always say start with the things you can control and don't try to change everything at once. Focus on making small, sustainable changes.
Small, sustainable changes. That feels doable, right? It's so easy to get overwhelmed when you start thinking about health. Like,
Mhm.
there's always some new diet or some crazy workout routine we're supposed to be following.
Well, absolutely. It's information overload out there. And that's actually why I think this report is so great. It's not about piling more onto our plates. It's about being intentional, making mindful choices that support, our overall health and our brain health at the
Yeah.
same time.
Right, exactly.
Things like, staying physically active, which we all know we should be doing, right?
Right.
So eating a balanced diet, managing stress, nurturing those social connections. I mean, those are all things that benefit our brains and our bodies in like countless ways.
And it's never too late to start, is it? I mean, we've talked about that life course perspective, how each stage kind of builds upon the last. But that means even if you're starting later in life, you can still make a difference, right?
Absolutely. And that's what I find so hopeful about all of this. Even if someone has had a lifetime of challenges, maybe limited access to health care, maybe face socioeconomic disadvantages, it's never too late. Our brains are amazing. They really have this incredible capacity for resilience and for adaptation no matter what age we are.
That's incredible. It really is. So, to everyone listening who's thinking, okay, I'm on board, I'm ready to make some changes, what would you suggest as a good starting point?
Honestly, start with something you enjoy. I always say that. Because if you hate running, don't force yourself to go run. You're not going to stick with it. Find an activity that brings you joy, whether that's, dancing, gardening, taking a walk in nature. The key is to just move your body regularly. And then when it comes to diet, try to focus on real whole foods as much as you can. Fruits, veggies, whole grains, lean protein, those are your friends. And you know what else we can't forget about? Sleep.
Sleep is so crucial. It's like hitting the reset button on our brains. And, something else I wanted to touch on before we wrap up, it's important to acknowledge that this isn't just about individual responsibility, right? This report really points out that our communities, our healthcare systems, they have a huge role to play in supporting brain health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't just put all the responsibility on individuals. We need to create environments where those healthy choices are like easier, more accessible for everyone. Imagine like communities designed with walkable streets and access to green spaces where healthy, affordable food is readily available and where people feel connected and supported. I mean, those are the kinds of environments that truly support brain health, for everybody.
It's about creating a world where brain health is truly a priority, where we're all empowered with the information and the resources that we need to protect our cognitive well-being, now and in the future.
Exactly. shifting that conversation from one of, fear and uncertainty to one of hope and possibility. And I really do think this report does an amazing job of doing that.
It really does. This whole deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered so much, from those surprising risk factors like vision loss and high cholesterol to, that empowering message that we actually have more control over our brain health than we might realize.
And that we're not alone in this journey, right?
Oh.
I mean, there's this incredible and growing global movement now focused on dementia prevention with amazing researchers, healthcare providers, advocates, all these people who are working tirelessly to find solutions and to raise awareness.
And if you're listening to this thinking, okay, I want to learn more, I want to dive deeper into this, you can actually find a link to the full Lancet Commission report over on our website. It's an awesome resource, seriously, packed with a ton of additional insights and information. So as we wrap up this deep dive, just remember that even small changes, when you make them consistently over time, they can have a really profound impact on your brain health. Stay curious, stay engaged, and never, ever underestimate the power of prevention. Until next time, keep diving deep.